Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule tonight to meet and be a part of this. I really appreciate it. So you're going to learn a lot about the millennial generation tonight, and I want you to play along as I'm asking questions. I want you to think about your own response to those questions. As well. There's a lot to cover, and it may be a little overwhelming. There's no quiz. You won't have to remember everything, so that's okay. But there's a lot to get through. So I'm going to try to be as efficient as I can be. So about myself, I'm Peter Darrow, for those that know me or don't know me. I have a degree in psychology. I have an MBA from Babson. I'm the author of an award-winning book, Wise Millennial, A Field Guide to Thriving in Modern Life, which came out a year ago. I also used to own a restaurant. And my core mission and passion is to empower millennials to detach from a lot of the messed up values we downloaded from society and our parents, and to develop a strong sense of self in order to live a more authentic, meaningful life. And as introduced, our moderator this evening, Susie Safranco, who's the director of individual giving at the ICP, which is, if you're not familiar with the ICP, is a teaching and exhibiting institution dedicated to photography and visual culture. They have a beautiful new building on the Lower East Side in Manhattan, which unfortunately right now is closed due to COVID, but hopefully they will open up soon. So thank you so much, Susie, for agreeing to help me with this. So the goal, what is the primary goal of the study? Why are we here? The primary goal of the study is to better understand the common struggles or pain points and goals that millennials share, if any. And the secondary goal is to identify areas of opportunity with an entrepreneurship mindset of how can I design something that will really help people in their lives. And I'll briefly explain that at the end. Just a high-level overview, very briefly. So these interviews were collected over a 4-month period from November to February. Each interview averaged between 60 to 90 minutes. Interviewees were solicited from various sources, my mailing list, friends of friends, Facebook groups, social media channels. There was no personal bias or screening in the whatsoever. It was a very egalitarian process. I simply just kind of created a link to my calendar. I offered everyone a gift certificate as a thank you and a free copy of my book. And that was about it. Why is this study significant? Why is this important? So all questions were open-ended, free-form response, meaning no multiple choice or limiting answers. And participants spoke freely for however long they wanted. You may be familiar with, large-scale studies. It's easy to boast thousands of people responded to this. I mean, it's easy to create a multiple choice question and send it out to 100,000 people with some, degree of accepted response. Those are more quantitative studies. This is a qualitative study. So while it is a smaller sample size, I would argue that in larger studies, you are not capturing all the data. You're missing some of the data. When people can speak freely as long as they want, it is the most accurate response you can get. And then I tried to kind of distill their responses, boil it down into high-level themes. But for this reason, you just won't find large-scale studies of this nature. I mean, I personally had to go through 400 pages of notes, by myself. And it's with the amount of manpower, it's almost impossible to do large-scale studies of this nature. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. These are weighted averages for each question. So the percentages you see are not the percent of respondents. They're the unique frequency of each response, how many times something is being mentioned. this is an art and not a science. You know, there's the human element to this. There are many different ways of saying the same thing: honesty and transparency, ambition versus drive. My favorite, I watch too much TV, or I use my cell phone too much. Both mean too much screen time as a theme. So that's no computer. There are nuances in the English language, and it's just a question of a human element of trying to understand what are people really saying. All the themes are presented in the order of significance. There is often not one leading category. You know, 90% of millennials do X, Y, and Z. It makes for a nice media soundbite. It's often not reality. These questions and answers are complex. And while this is not a scientific study per se, it is my opinion that the sample group accurately reflects the majority of attitudes and opinions of the millennial generation. Keep in mind, the scope is not intended to capture all aspects of society demographically in terms of financial, gender, et cetera. You know, the participants are self-selective, so take that into consideration when evaluating this information. And lastly, and most important, conjecture, the definition of conjecture: an opinion or conclusion formed on the basis of incomplete information. There is no conjecture in this study. Nothing that you are about to hear is my opinion. I cannot state this more strongly enough. I'll say it again. None of the following that you're about to hear is my opinion. I simply aggregated the concepts to display what millennials are feeling. And just briefly, some of the demographics. There were 73 total participants, 67 millennials. I thought this was fun. Over 2,300 years of combined experience. Different generations participated. What are millennials? Who are millennials? That's a great question. Not everyone knows what a millennial is. So there's different definitions. Mostly common accepted is 1981 to 1996. So currently 23 to 24, hitting 38, 39. We have yet to hit 40, but that's coming up soon. I'm sure we'll all survive it. And the average age was about 32 of the study. Lastly, there are a few non-millennials that participated in the study, but for all intents and purposes, all their responses were non-millennials were not tabulated in the results. It was only millennials that I was counting. Gender demographic, male, 41% male, 59% female. We had a few different international participants. We had pretty wide demographic across the United States, a lot from California and New York City. I thought it would be fun to see what the marriage rates, if there was any difference between people who live in metropolitan versus rural or suburban areas. Not surprisingly, fewer people are married who live in metropolitan areas. And lastly, not captured in the data, but worth noting, this is a very diverse group of people. I mean, different people, different faiths: Muslim, Christian, Jewish, gay, straight, bisexual, different socioeconomic statuses. I intentionally did not record this profiling data because it wasn't really relevant to the data I was trying to pull, and I wasn't trying to profile people, but I know from their conversations and from people revealing this information to me. So with that said, we will dive right in. So question one, do you consider yourself a millennial? Why or why not? What are the defining characteristics of millennials, if any? And so what we learn is that millennials are technologically savvy and focused on social media. They feel strongly about work, career, and money. They tend to lack financial awareness or have savings, focus less on status and more on experiences and social currency. Have a strong focus on personal growth and development and freedom. We care about health and wellness and sexuality. We're a sensitive group and tend to have fragile egos. We struggle between wanting community and acceptance, but without comparison, which is an interesting point. We'll get to that later. And they have a unique mindset. We care about having an impact and affecting change. Lastly, millennials, it's a coming of age story. It's a wide generation of 15 years. There's a lot of different life stages in millennials. And there are three main historical markers that define our generation: the 2008 recession, 9/11, and specific cultural references: Tamagotchi, Britney Spears, Power Rangers, etc. Do you consider yourself a millennial? Everyone I asked is a millennial. So in theory, the answer should be 100%. It is not. 73% consider a millennial, and over 25% do not consider themselves a millennial, which is interesting. People are either on the cusp or unsure. Some say yes or no. And then on the right, you can see the percentage breakdown of the responses. What are other generations saying? What are other generations' points of view? Gen Z. Gen Z has a facade of being self-aware, but they're self-absorbed. Millennials are not as strong mentally. Everything is being pillowed. Gen Z is more self-aware. Gen X. Gen X had no attachment to generation generally. Happiness wasn't the goal. Success was purely financial based. The only path to success was working hard, making lots of money. If you work hard and a lot, good things will happen. And the silent generation, we're self-starters. We read frequently, we read well, we write well. Millennials are spoiled. They receive too many presents. Mom and dad will always be there to help, no repayment required. What are the millennials saying? I'm a Gen Zennial. This is the way we've always done it. I say, why? If this doesn't work out, I'm going to do this other thing without taking time to listen, reflect, and create steadfast vision and goals. Taking jobs based on social media platforms, reality versus Instagram reality. I want to make a connection, but don't know how to make a connection. So much choice these days limits our open-mindedness. People lose their identity by having too much choice. Question 2, what is happiness to you? And I would ask that all of you, what is happiness to you? So what we find is that happiness, according to the study, is about feeling content and not being affected by external expectations. It's about goal setting and motivation, having a clear sense of purpose and then achieving those goals. It's about having a strong community, having balance and financial freedom, both mental, physical, and spiritual health. Alternatively, some suggest that happiness shouldn't be the focus, but rather joy and gratitude. And you can see the breakdowns of the percentages by response here. What are millennials saying? Surrounded by a knowledge or comfort that I have a strong group that supports me and understands what I'm doing. Work wants to make a buck, family wants you around, friends want a few extra beers, people get worn too thin because they say yes to too many people. Can get to be your average your whole life and be fulfilled. Don't necessarily need to be the best in everything in your life. Happiness is, in big picture scheme, is fulfillment. Fulfillment is doing things that are meaningful to you. Different than joy, happiness is temporary. Joy is happiness without circumstance. Question 3, what are some voids in your life that would make you even happier or more fulfilled? In other words, what are you seeking? Millennials are primarily seeking romantic relationships, or more appropriately, partnerships and family. They want more money and financial independence so we can have freedom to explore and travel, want more time for personal pursuits and seek better time management systems, feel a void in our own community and environments, tend to feel a void with career and work flexibility. Mental and physical health are important. And we have a desire for a clear mindset and purpose. And again, you can see the top 3 breakdowns of percentages, relationships, financial, time and time management systems, and then the rest. What are millennials saying? My parents help me, would like to function on my own. They don't use money to control, would be empowering to say I can do things on my own. Nagging thought, is this the right thing for me in a field that might be rewarding to me? Every time I get promoted, people slapping me on the back. Is this the right path for me? Creates more stress. Why am I even putting myself through this? Me Too movement, pressures for women to get married for financial safety net. Double standard, want to stand on their own, but also want the comfort of a man. And life is fucking stressful and overwhelming. And yes, I can agree to that at sometimes. Question 4, what do you or your friends struggle with? What frustrates you? And so we can all think about that. An overwhelming majority of millennials' biggest struggles and frustrations are money and career, not having enough student debt, dealing with other people, romantic, online versus in-person dating, opening up and expressing emotions, finding someone that understands you, Communication, disrespect to others, blanket statements, stereotypes, judgments. Societal expectations, comparing yourself to others, living up to others' expectations, proving yourself. Existential thought, why are we really here? Keeping perspective. And to a lesser degree, time management, changing habits, bureaucracy, and parents. What do your friends struggle with? Again, the breakdown by percentages. Obviously, those are the top three: money, career, frustrations, and societal expectations, and the rest. What are millennials saying? Well, the Gen X perspective. All of my friends are in similar financial situation. We're fucking lucky. Don't have pressure of can we pay our bills? We don't have the right other than to be happy. There is a guilt that if you're not happy and grateful every day, then shame on you. What are the millennials saying? Generational gap. Some boomers can never stop working. They work till they're dead. Millennials saying you're an expert when you have no fucking idea what you're talking about. Never worked a job in your life. You are a consultant when you have no experience. Dating, money. We all got 4-year degrees and still struggling. We are baby adults, not getting paid my correct salary. I just got my master's. I don't like how people talk to each other. It's not appropriate. When guys use power or money or slut shame, people project their own stuff. I don't want to belittle people based on the way they look. Dating. Difficult to find meaningful connections, being on the same page in regards to drinking, drugs, partying. You find someone who checks off the boxes, then they're not into you or emotionally available, or you found out they're dating 3 other people. As a woman, we follow a lot of Instagram influencers. Guard your heart and mind. Remember, these are glorified highlights of people's lives. I can't go to Bali. Your family and marriage looks perfect. My life is nothing like that. Brag about how many people we unfollow. I think I'm not enough. Take a sip of water here. Question 5. What are your buttons and who installed them? So in other words, if I want to push your buttons, if I want to get you riled up, what do I have to say or do? Millennials' primary buttons are manipulative behavior, being told what to do or what to think, bringing others down, acting better than others. Disrespect, not listening, violating space, boundaries, and wasting time are the main 2. There's a lot of other things that piss people off. Politics and society, injustice, assumption by others, rudeness, backward thinking, control. And millennials by far place the source of our buttons on our parents and family, and notably twice as often mom than dad. So sorry, mom. And again, you can see the breakdown of percentages pretty evenly distributed throughout. And then who installed them? Our parents, a few other sources, media, childhood, growing up, religion, work experiences. What are millennials saying? Core thing is that my family rejected me, so I became the most popular girl in school, dated whoever I wanted. Society treats you better if they think you come from money. Being bullied in childhood or being mean to me, I put up protective armor, became a little edgier. Blatantly ignoring the morality of people based on what they've previously accomplished. When my kids are mean to each other or other people, I was that kid. I was that cool kid. Made me feel like shit. Why was I an asshole? Made me feel worse. Being a bitch to people made people feel shitty. Don't know why I did it. Bitchy girls for no reason. So we're at the halfway point here. I'm going to take a 10-second break. I'm just going to take a water break. I know it's a lot to absorb. So we'll start the other second half in a second here. And please continue submitting questions to Susie. So question 6, what insecurities do you have? Virtually all millennials, 95% that I surveyed, fall into one or more of 5 high-level insecurity categories. And in order, they are comparing, not feeling popular enough, fill in the blank, smart, successful, worthy. Communication, different communication patterns, being too extra, trusting people, remaining authentic. Imposter syndrome, defined as a psychological pattern where you doubt your own accomplishments and you have a fear of being exposed as a fraud. Money and finding a fulfilling career. Romantic relationships, dating, being a good partner, and parenting. And other, race, religion, control. And again, you can see the breakdown of percentages by far. Obviously, comparing and communication patterns are the top two, and then everything else. What are millennials saying? When I go to a Harvard Business School reunion in 10 years, I don't want people to think I'm a fucking idiot. How successful are you? Tie accomplishment to self-worth. I view what I have accomplished to my value as a person. Dating, if a girl is insanely hot, why did she agree to go out with me? I need to remind myself that I'm the man. Dating, cheated on several times, molested by someone in the church. Not poor, but constantly broke. Question 7, any unhealthy habits you want to let go of? What are your unhealthy habits? The primary two categories of unhealthy habits are wellness related, lack of sleep, exercise, or poor eating, and forming addictive vices, smoking, biting fingernails, excessive porn use, drug use, tobacco. And then there are 5 other categories: head noise, screen usage, as we talked about, negative self-talk, time related, including procrastination, pushing things off, or spending too much time being a perfectionist, and vocalization related, including not speaking up or staying silent to avoid confrontation. And again, you can see the percentages of the breakdown here. Personal wellness, forming vices, pretty significant, and then the rest. And then the top 5, those were categories or themes. The top 5 individual habits that were mentioned by people was stress eating, drinking less, overthinking things, negative self-talk, and too much screen time. What are millennials saying? High school, transitioning from being overweight to thin, mild case of anorexia, punishing myself for not being able to be active. If I can't do this, then I just won't eat today. Peer pressure, hard to sometimes to say no. Started juuling, it was a stupid thing. I did it for a few months. Being manipulated, social pressure. Wanting to be cool, want to fit in. How would you react if you deleted Instagram and lost all of your followers? Instead of thinking through things at night or talking to my husband, easier to use my phone and numb out. When I'm under a tremendous amount of stress, I can be paralyzed to the point I don't take any action at all, hide, run away from everything, keep saying yes to things that distract me. So for question 8, it's a 2-part question. What kinds of topics do you discuss with your friends? And then what would you like to talk about, if not the same answer? And for this question only, I thought it would be interesting to separate it between genders of male and female to see what are the differences between what women and men talk about. Are there any differences? So let's find out. Ladies, the primary 3 topic discussions among women are relationships, romantic, dating, freezing eggs, parenting, men, sex, work, career, and personal growth, self-development, spirituality, meaning of life, existential psychology. Ladies, what would you prefer to talk about? Politics, without offending people, deep insecurities and dark personality traits, finances and money, emotions, know your worth statements, and mentorship, entrepreneurship, niche interests, and intimacy. And you can see the breakdown here on the right of the top 3 things. Women talk about lots of things. We all talk about lots of things. And you can see the breakdown of percentages. Men, what do men talk about? Is it the same? Is it different? Let's find out. The top 2 discussions among men are business and entrepreneurship, including work and career, politics, including news and world affairs. Men, what would you prefer to talk about? Emotions and psychology, finances, philosophy, less gossip, putting others down, specific action steps to success, and religion. And again, you can see the data breakdown here, percentages, pretty evenly distributed. Men talk about also lots of things. Key insights and differences. I thought this was kind of interesting between the 2 genders. Politics is one of the most talked about topics among men. It is one of the least among women. When it comes to business and work, men use the word entrepreneurship far more often than women, whereas women use the word career far more often than men. No female participant used the words 5 or 10-year plan. Women discuss travel far more often than men. No male participant mentioned the word sex when talking about relationships and dating. I guess men just don't talk about sex with other men. No male mentioned fashion. No female participant mentioned home ownership, sports, or news. Daily struggles is a term that women often like to use versus men shooting the shit. And interestingly, male participants mentioned the word gossip several times. No female mentioned the word gossip, but females use the word other people in lieu of gossip. I thought that was an interesting semantical difference. What are millennials saying? What are the females saying? Wish we could talk more about our deepest insecurities. Real talk. People are scared to reveal things. I see men get worked up over certain issues and have a yelling match. It's completely acceptable. If a woman reacts the exact same way, they're labeled as too emotional, irrational, and not capable of making decisions. Would like to talk about politics and not have issues. My friend is a Republican and a Trump supporter and can't talk about stuff with her. From Gen X, about menopause, hormone medication. Is anyone still having sex with their husband? How? Kids are having sex, doing drugs. Older you get, not the competition anymore. Men, don't have time to discuss much with friends. I go home, I go to work, I go home, that's my routine. It would be nice if people asked me how I was doing more often. Part of that is me speaking up. Would like to talk more about money. When making $250K or more, there are conversations about self-care that are totally divorced from money. And other friends who aren't in the room make fun of people. People like to talk about jobs, career, sports, shoot the shit. Girls, who they're dating, what's happening. Okay, question 9. What is something you wish someone had told you 5 years ago, or you had told yourself that you had to learn on your own, but would have made life so much easier had you known? So what would you have told your younger self? What lessons have you learned? And there are 3 primary lessons that millennials have learned. These are not direct quotes. These are just kind of themes. So the first one is self. Focus on self and be present. Stop comparing yourself to others or society. Trust your gut. Entrepreneurship, career, take action earlier in life. Don't waste time. Don't be afraid to fail. You have diverse career options. Learn to let go. Don't sweat the small stuff. Everything is temporary. Focus on what you can control. Embrace the future. Let go of friendships that no longer serve you. And again, you can see the data breakdown here of the top 3, pretty significant, over 50%, and then the rest. What are millennials saying? If people aren't being as responsive as you are, it doesn't mean they hate you or don't like you. Secret to life, big amounts of stress can be reduced by over-communicating to lower other people's expectations. You can actually be an expert in anything you spend time on. I didn't realize you could do whatever you want. Wish someone in my life would have said to me, you're 30, how are you investing your money, and how easy it is. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. I had a sexual assault experience. Don't let your self-worth be attached to intelligence and productivity. And finally, question 10, what motivates you? What gets you out of bed every day? What are you really seeking in life deep in your core? And we can kind of think about that. There appear to be 3 separate tiers that motivate millennials. And tier 1 is impact on others and the world, new experiences, adventure, and financial stability. Tier 2 is work, excelling at your job, becoming a better person, and self-discovery, including finding your purpose. And then tier 3 is happiness, family, relationships, and connection with others. And you can see the breakdown of the 3 tiers here in terms of percentages. What are millennials saying? Let's hear from Silent Generation about millennials. Millennials are unhappy because they don't place an emphasis on hard work. Hard work instills confidence, achievement, and accomplishment. Sitting on social media, not using time wisely, they feel worse about themselves. Work keeps you from spending money. Thank you, Silent Generation. I want to do something impactful and meaningful. I don't know what that is, still figuring it out. The journey of self-discovery can be a roller coaster, realizing I had depression, getting out of bed wasn't a joy for me. Journey of discovering who you truly are. Usefulness, feeling like I'm useful. The world is better because I'm contributing. Affirmation from other people. I don't know, I want to feel like I matter. So, conclusions, that's obviously a lot of information to absorb and digest in a short period of time, but there are several consistent themes which millennials share across the board, which I'm going to reveal to you. And so the first is relationships. We have a desire to find a partner, as well as an equal struggle in finding one. We want to settle, but not settle with just anybody. We want to settle with the right person. And also spending more quality time with our family, especially as our parents get older. Work, career. We want to discover our purpose in life and find a career path that is meaningful and fulfilling. We want to have flexibility and work-life balance. We're not driven by money alone, but we recognize that money is required to have a lifestyle of freedom and independence. Personal development and growth. We want to continue to learn and grow and develop our relationships with ourselves and others. We remain focused on trying to answer some of life's deepest questions. Why are we here? What is our purpose? What is our self-worth? We strive to live a life that is in alignment with our values and beliefs. Communication. Millennials often struggle with and get frustrated by poor communication or miscommunication with others. The combination of technology and smartphones, hiding behind text messages instead of phone calls. And the other part is having a fragile ego, not wanting to hurt others or get hurt emotionally. And you can blame our parents for coddling us too much. Time and time management. Sometimes we struggle with work-life balance and establishing structured systems to manage our time better. We want to learn to let go of bad habits. Millennials sometimes feel guilty outsourcing tasks and will stay in bad situations longer than we should. We tend to overthink things rather than just doing the thing. And lastly, connection and comparison. We genuinely seek authentic connection with like-minded people. We don't know where or how to find these people. We sometimes struggle with how to break past surface level conversation. And my favorite quote of the whole study is, we want community and acceptance, but without comparison, which, lastly, millennials passionately do not want to be compared with others or judged by society's standards. And I think this is a potential defining characteristic of the millennial generation. So before we get to questions, as I promised, there was one additional question on the study which wasn't published. And as I mentioned, and the question was, if you could develop a product or service that would really help you, what would it be? And the majority response that I got from millennials was that I want to be matched with like-minded people based on common goals and interests and with a community. Now that sounds nice, but the question is, how do you execute on that? And so I'm excited to kind of announce, and what I'm going to be launching this fall is a group mentoring virtual community platform focused on personal and professional development. So the way I describe it is Bumble BFF meets LinkedIn with groups, where you get group mentoring and you get grouped in with other people. There's more information that's coming about that, and you'll learn more about that in the weeks to come. But I'm really excited to launch that as really a byproduct of the study. So with that, I guess we will open it up to questions.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Peter. That was, I feel like I'm still digesting it. That was an amazing amount of information, but a very succinct overview. We have some great questions coming in. I'm still sort of gathering them, but I think one place that's really fitting to start off is we have a question from Charlie, just asking, like, what are your thoughts on how millennials have handled COVID? That is, I mean, here we all are on Zoom doing this, and Charlie was asking, especially since these surveys were all conducted pre-quarantine. So do you think, this major moment would have any impact on the answers? As Charlie put it, this is really a crucial generational defining moment for millennial, like for every generation, but definitely millennials. age range. So yeah, can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I mean, these questions were asked pre-COVID. I mean, to not completely invalidate the study, I would like to believe that these questions are, pretty high level in terms of, I mean, regardless of COVID. I think that the desires and wants of the millennial generation aren't going to change overnight in terms of drastically. However, absolutely. I mean, there's certainly questions I wish I could have asked. I think this is, not to be naive to the people who have been hurt, but and harmed by COVID. But for those who are healthy, I think that COVID is an interesting social experiment for our generation. I think it's a moment to really reflect. And I think that there may be desires and goals that will change. Again, this was really intended to capture the big picture motivations, but that certainly might change. I would be curious to do a follow-up survey, maybe not as in depth as the first one. I absolutely think that this is a time for millennials to be more introspective and really think about what they really want out of life. Hopefully as a generation, there's lots of opportunity. So it's a great question. I think that there's, like I said, I think it's an interesting social experiment with COVID, and I'm excited to see how things evolve post-COVID with this.
Great. So there's a few people that had kind of comments that inspired questions throughout the presentation. So one in particular is that, and I think this relates to many of your slides, is that as a generation, this is from Isabel, as a generation, we supposedly are focused less on financial success than our parents. I think hard work was mentioned in one of the slides, and more on experiences and relationships. Yet our Instagrams are filled with comparisons of materialistic goals, cars, travels, clothes, body types. And it feels like there's a disconnect between what we say we want and materialism. So this can create a lot of depression if you're not at the same level of others when comparing ourselves. So it led to the question of, should we get rid of Instagram? I think that opens a whole can of worms regarding our generation specifically, how we use social media in both a positive and a negative way.
Yeah, I mean, a few thoughts. It's a great question. I mean, first off, they're talking about removing the like feature from Instagram. Actually, I don't know if they've started to implement that or not, because it just becomes a race to the bottom. So, someone told me, it was actually a really interesting quote, that comparing Gen Z to millennials, that Instagram is where millennials go to feel bad about themselves. TikTok is where Gen Z goes to feel good about themselves. I thought that was kind of an interesting platform debate. I think that in terms of actions and behaviors not leading to one another, listen, there is an innate human desire to want to be liked and accepted. We have unfortunately gamified that. I mean, who created social media platforms, right? Millennials, Zuckerberg. I mean, that's a product of our generation, unfortunately. And so what I would say is that social media in itself is a very powerful tool objectively, right? The concept of being able to share information with each other instantly from across the world, where we bastardize it, for lack of a better word, or really weaponize it, is in this comparison game of trying, look at my life, look how great it is. I'm on this beach. I hope you can join me. It's not reality, and it's really just a projection of our own insecurities. It's just giving people a platform that they never had before. I mean, 20 years ago, people might have been, we all have, the same deep insecurities, fundamental insecurities. We just didn't have a way to broadcast it. And so this now allows people to broadcast it. I would say limiting Instagram exposure time is probably maybe controversial, but I would, recommend it for sure. Their algorithms don't always work the way that they should either.
Yeah, definitely.
I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I think so. The question asker is welcome to follow up. I'm still getting lots of questions in, Peter. I'm just trying to stay on top of it. So
that's all right. No worries.
Um, so I think there's two questions from two different people that are sort of about the study itself, which I think maybe I'll ask them together and it can lead to a more fruitful answer. But one is sort of, if you could talk more about the sample size. So you said that you had about 67 people and most of them you knew personally. So the question was wondering if you feel like maybe one of the flaws in the study is that the data is sort of skewed towards people that you associate yourself with. And then a second question from a different person is, are you considering doing a survey portion to this study to augment your conclusions with a larger sample size? Let me know if you got all that.
Yeah, I understand the first question. The second question, repeat the second question one more time.
Just it's sort of almost a follow-up to this other person's questions, but are you considering doing like a survey to augment this study with like a larger sample size?
I understand. Again, okay, so to the first question, just to clarify, actually, in fact, most of the people were not people that I knew. I did reach out to my extended network. However, actually, the biggest source of respondents actually came from online Facebook communities that have thousands of people. One is Simon Sinek's group, Inspired, Safe, and Fulfilled. If you're familiar with Simon Sinek, he's got like 40,000 people in his Facebook group, and they were very generous to allow me to publish my link in there. Also, there's another group, Personal Development Nerds, which, you know, is people who are focused on personal development. So that is a bit of a self-selective audience, but that has about 4,000 members in it. I wish I could have interviewed all of them. So the reality is actually, it's a fair question. Most of the people actually, thankfully, were not people I knew. But to your point, to the point of the question, it is a self-selective audience, as I said in the beginning, because it is people who are focused on personal development. I can't force someone to sit for an hour and a half and take an interview that they don't want to take, you know, unless I just can't do that. And then to follow up your question, the augmenting, yeah, the follow-up. So, I mean, again, these were open-ended free-form questions. So I could do, unfortunately, there really isn't a survey per se, because when you know, there was no multiple choice, as I stated in the beginning. So to do a survey would be to, you know, to follow up. I mean, I could certainly do that. And especially with COVID, it might be interesting to do a supplemental version of this, albeit much less, not 400 pages of notes, because that took a lot of time. But yeah, I mean, listen, again, that's the difference between quantitative studies and qualitative studies. And it just depends what direction you want to go in with that. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, no, I think so. Let me see. There's actually some interesting questions about or comments about gender, the section where you kind of broke down women, you know, female and male answers to the different questions. So one comment that I think is really insightful is that from Darcy, I would bet that the reason women avoid discussing politics with their friends is because they place a high value on harmony, and not that they don't have an interest in politics. Which as a woman, I completely, that resonated with me. So I think it was a great insight. I don't know if you have any further thing to say about that.
Well, it'd be naive for me to speak on behalf of all women, so I'll be careful here. It's a sensitive topic, but I appreciate the question, Darcy, or the comment. I think, and again, you know, listen, a different sample, different people, you'd get, you know, maybe different results. I think that, yeah, I think that, you know, this concept of being confrontational. And as one of the participants, as one of the quotes we heard was that if, you know, there's a double standard that if women get too emotional, that they're labeled as not competent, or that they're not allowed to get reactive, but men do this all the time in the workplace and it's totally acceptable. So I definitely, yeah, I think you're not alone in that, this concept of harmony versus competition, or yeah, it's an interesting one, probably above my pay grade, but I definitely, something worth evaluating deeper into.
Yeah, and then another one on the flip side was from Charlie saying he was shocked that sports wasn't a topic or a top 2 topic for men, but he thinks that, you know, for example, his dad only knows how to talk about sports, so maybe people in the millennial generation have learned from that, from their from their elders, how to have more in-depth conversations. So I thought that was really an interesting insight from the flip side, from the male side.
We're making progress, slowly but surely. We're making slow progress as a generation. Yeah, I don't have any deeper insights on that, but it's an interesting point. It's a valid point.
Yeah. I have another one about the survey itself, from Rogelio, asking regarding the 25% of respondents that did not consider themselves millennials. Did you ask why? And did their answers differ significantly in any way?
Yeah, it's a great question. Some just weren't sure, just didn't really know what the definition was. A lot of it has to do with the media, you know, because millennials are portrayed negatively. It is such a hot topic word and sense of word that some people, they don't want to be associated with millennials. And then I ask them, well, what generation are you? They say, I don't know, no generation, or I'm an elder millennial. But people, yeah, I think that people do, either they just don't want to be associated with the millennial stereotype because they think that they're going to be labeled. Again, this is a very sensitive generation. I'm a part of it, that doesn't, you know, wants community and acceptance, but doesn't want to be labeled. I think it's such a fascinating. That was the last point I made. That quote. It's almost an oxymoron. It's like we want to be a part of a large group, but we don't want to be. We're all individuals. It's an interesting concept.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I have 2 more, unless any more come in. Again, kind of about the study, from Vanessa saying, did you start this study with the idea of it being negative, or did the data lean you that way? Why did you choose not to include anything positive?
Trying to understand by negative. You know, I'm trying to understand the question.
I think perhaps in the responses, the people's responses kind of having a more negative outlook in response to the questions that were asked. Do you feel that maybe, I think this is what she's asking, is that the questions kind of perhaps led people to answer in a certain way, or do you feel that is a natural kind of occurrence?
I tried to be as objective as I possibly can, Vanessa. I mean, I will tell you, you know, if I ask someone, what are your insecurities? You know, it's a very unbiased question, especially if I tried to be as objective as I could and not lead people. In terms of, you know, what quotes I chose, I mean, I chose ones that I thought were most reflective and representative of the group and the ones that stood out the most. But in terms of the questions themselves, I mean, I tried to my very best, to my core, to be as, you know, neutral as I could be in the types of questions. And again, you know, people can respond and talk for as long as they want. So I really tried not to skew the results in any way. If that answers your question, I would say that that's kind of naturally how it came out. I mean, in my opinion, I have no, you know, hidden agenda here. I'm not trying to prove any point. I really am just objectively trying to understand what are the common struggles or pain points that millennials share. So if it came off as negative anyway, I would say that is a natural, organic process. I did not, you know, manipulate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Vanessa has some more follow-up, so
Sure.
we'll chat. Let me send them to you offline. But
Sure. I'm happy to, you know, answer. I'm happy to follow up via email with anybody and you know, answer more detailed questions.
Yeah, we have. Okay, I think there's 2 more that are actually sort of the same question, so I'm going to combine them.
Okay.
From Rogelio and Charlie, kind of a good way to maybe to wrap up in thinking about the study. What was like the most surprising insight that you learned or like most interesting, or something that you weren't expecting? That's a combination of Rogelio and Charlie's questions.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a couple things. I mean, I think the insecurity question, you know, trying to find those the five different kind of themes that people boiled down to, that almost all millennials fell into, I thought was fascinating. I can't recite them off the top of my head. You can look back, but I think the insecurity question was really insightful. I thought the men and women, again, maybe a little sensitive, maybe a little controversial. I thought that was an interesting breakdown. But again, I think the final point that I made, that you know, millennials they do not want to be labeled. They do not want to be judged. They want to have they want to have their own voice. They want to feel a part of a community, and that's very important. But they don't want to be labeled. And sometimes I think that those, I don't know, you know, sometimes those don't always fit in with each other, and they can conflict. And I think that's the source of a lot of conflict for people. Of, I want to be part of this, but I don't want to be, you know, marginalized in any way. And so I think that is I think that was probably the most insightful takeaway of the study.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, Peter, maybe you mentioned that there's a way people can follow up with more questions. Do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm available in every possible millennial way. So email, my name, Peter at happywellness.com. That's the name of my company, happywellness.com. Or you can DM me on Instagram at Wise Millennial. Everything at Facebook, Wise Millennial is the brand. And you can find me online, and I'm happy to answer any other, you know, follow-up questions as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I feel like I learned a lot. And I know this study is available. So I hope everyone checks it out.
Yep, you can go on my website, and it's wisemillennial.com, and download the study for free. I'm going to put this replay on there as well. And again, I just want to thank everyone. I want to thank all of you for being so active and interested in my work, and for participating. I know this is a lot to absorb, but I just really appreciate all of you, and want to thank you all so much for coming and participating. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night. See you guys soon.